The sun had barely started setting over Maple Grove when Karen Miller, the HOA president, marched up to my front porch, her high heels clicking with each step like the countdown to a disaster. My heart pounded as I stood there, cradling my 3-day-old daughter, Emma, in my arms, her tiny fingers clutching mine as if she knew something was wrong. I'd spent the past few days running on little sleep, tending to my wife, Sarah, who was still recovering from a difficult birth, and trying to adjust to life as a new father. But all that faded the moment Karen's cold blue eyes locked onto me. "Your daughter is a disturbance," she spat, pointing at Emma with the same contempt she had for anyone who dared to defy her precious rules. Before I could even respond, she stormed into our home, locking my disabled daughter in a room and declaring it for her own good. The nerve. This was more than a simple rule violation. This was a declaration of war. And I wasn't going to let her destroy my family without a fight. I knew right then that this would be the battle of my life, one I had to win at all costs. The anger surged through me like wildfire. I would protect my family, even if it meant bringing down the tyrant of Maple Grove herself. Maple Grove had always felt like the kind of neighborhood you'd see in a glossy magazine, perfectly manicured lawns, pristine houses, and the hum of quiet suburban life. It was the kind of place people dreamed of living in, where every house seemed like a mirror of the one next door, with the same shade of mailbox, the same neatly trimmed hedges, and the same white picket fences that screamed perfect. Every Sunday, the whole neighborhood seemed to come alive with people walking their dogs, children riding their bikes along the smooth sidewalks, and neighbors waving at each other from their front porches, exchanging pleasantries over freshly brewed coffee. It was idyllic. It was safe. It was everything we'd ever wanted. Or, at least, it was supposed to be. Sarah and I had always dreamed of raising a family in a place like Maple Grove. After years of struggling with infertility, we'd finally been blessed with our daughter, Emma. She was born a little earlier than expected, and with her being born with a disability, life hadn't been exactly easy. But it didn't matter. She was our miracle. Every moment with her was precious, even the sleepless nights and the constant appointments with doctors. We had created a beautiful nursery for her, with soft yellow walls and a crib surrounded by stuffed animals, each one carefully chosen. We made sure everything was perfect for her, because Emma deserved that. She was the center of our world, and the love we had for her was limitless. Sarah, despite her exhaustion from a difficult pregnancy and a hard labor, was the heart of our family. She had always been the one who made our house feel like a home, filling every room with warmth and laughter. Even after Emma's birth, she did everything she could to make sure our home was a sanctuary for us all. Her strength and grace had always inspired me, but nothing compared to the way she cared for our daughter. I could see the joy in her eyes every time she held Emma, whispering sweet words to her, teaching her about the world in the most tender of ways. But life in Maple Grove wasn't as perfect as it seemed. Beneath the seemingly perfect houses and well-maintained streets was a power that overshadowed everything. The Homeowners Association, or HOA, led by Karen Miller, the neighborhood's self-appointed ruler. She was a woman of routine, of control, and of a deep desire to enforce her version of perfection. There was no room for deviation in her world. Everything had to follow her meticulously crafted rules, or else you'd be subjected to her wrath. Karen had lived in Maple Grove for years, and she made sure everyone knew it. She wore her title of HOA president like a badge of honor, striding around the neighborhood with her clipboard in hand, inspecting the tiniest of flaws. If a lawn wasn't mowed to her exacting standards, she was there with a letter in hand, demanding action. If a mailbox was a centimeter out of place, she was there to issue a fine. And heaven help you if you missed the deadline for bringing in your trash cans. It didn't matter that you were a new parent exhausted from sleepless nights or dealing with the chaos of a newborn. If Karen saw something wrong, she made sure you knew about it. That afternoon, as I stood on our porch, cradling Emma in my arms, I thought about all the ways we had come to love our life in Maple Grove. It had been a place of peace, of safety, of comfort. We had made it our home, our perfect little bubble. But in that perfect bubble, we also had to deal with Karen's oppressive rule. It wasn't enough for her to simply manage the HOA. No, she felt entitled to dictate how we lived our lives, down to the very details of how our trash cans were placed. For the past 2 years, we had managed to avoid her scrutiny for the most part. But that afternoon, as the sun began to set and the sky turned a brilliant orange, that perfect bubble was about to burst. Karen's harsh voice broke through the calm, like a storm shattering the tranquility we had fought so hard to create. "Michael Reed," she shouted, walking across the lawn with an air of superiority, "your trash cans are still out. It's past 6 o'clock. The rules are very clear about this." Her voice carried in the stillness of the evening, making my stomach turn. The warmth of the moment, holding Emma in my arms, evaporated, replaced by a growing sense of dread. Karen had found a reason to attack. Her eyes narrowed as she assessed my lawn, her gaze cold and unrelenting. It was as if she were looking for any tiny fault, any excuse to make our life harder. I looked at Emma, who was now starting to stir in my arms, her tiny fingers clutching mine. Sensing the tension, she let out a soft cry, her innocence undisturbed by the harsh reality unfolding before her. I kissed her forehead, trying to calm her, as Sarah, exhausted from her recovery, slept inside. The last thing I wanted was for Sarah to wake up to this, her first real rest after 3 days of grueling labor, only to be greeted by Karen's disdain. "Karen, please, my wife just gave birth. We've had a lot going on," I said, my voice strained with the effort to remain calm. But Karen didn't care. Her cold, steely gaze never wavered. "I don't care about your personal problems," she snapped. "The rules apply to everyone. If you can't follow them, maybe you don't belong in this neighborhood." Those words hit me harder than I expected. It was as if she was stripping away the very essence of what we had worked so hard to build. Our home, our family, and our joy meant nothing to her. What mattered was conformity, her idea of perfection. As I brought the trash cans in one-handed, still holding Emma close to my chest, I could feel the anger bubbling inside me. It wasn't just about the trash cans. It was about Karen's disregard for our lives, for our happiness, for the very essence of who we were as a family. In that moment, I realized that no matter how perfect the neighborhood seemed, no matter how serene and flawless it appeared on the outside, it was never going to be perfect as long as Karen Miller was in charge. And I was going to have to make sure that the life we had fought for was protected no matter the cost. It had only been 3 days since Sarah and I had brought Emma into the world, our little miracle. Every moment felt precious, and I was trying so hard to savor it all. The quiet, peaceful moments of holding my daughter, watching her tiny fingers curl around mine, feeling the weight of her innocence in my arms. The overwhelming exhaustion from the past few days seemed to disappear when I looked at her. Emma was my world, and I couldn't imagine anything or anyone hurting her. I was doing my best to let Sarah rest, as she needed every ounce of sleep to recover from her difficult birth. But as I stood on the front porch, the last thing I expected was for the perfect suburban life I'd worked so hard to create to be shattered by a single woman, the HOA President, Karen Miller. I had heard her coming before. I saw her, the sharp, angry click of her high heels on the concrete sidewalk. I looked up, my heart sinking, and there she was, marching toward my house with the same determined stride she always had. Karen Miller was the kind of person who believed rules were everything. She took the position of HOA president as if it were a royal title, one she wielded like a sword. She'd been the HOA president for 8 years, and in that time, she had turned our once peaceful community into a battleground where perfection was demanded at every turn. It didn't matter if you had a newborn, if you were recovering from surgery, or if you had a broken leg, you followed her rules or you faced her wrath. I should have known it was only a matter of time before she found something to criticize. As I stood there, holding Emma, I could feel the tension in my chest as Karen's piercing gaze locked onto me. Her cold, calculating eyes scanned the yard, her clipboard gripped tightly in her hand. "Michael Reed, She called out sharply, her voice as cold as ice. Your trash cans are still sitting at the curb. It's after 6 o'clock. You know the rules. This is a neighborhood, not a landfill. I took a deep breath, try and stay calm. My body was already tense, but I didn't want to lose my temper. I didn't want to wake Sarah, who had been through so much over the past few days. I held Emma tightly against my chest, feeling her soft little body against mine, her tiny breaths calming me. Karen, please, I said, keeping my voice as steady as I could. My wife just gave birth yesterday. She's resting right now. I've had my hands full with the baby. I'll take care of the trash cans in a minute. Karen didn't seem to hear me. Her eyes narrowed as she stepped closer, her heels clicking like a warning. I don't care about your personal problems, Michael, she said with venom in her voice, her words sharp and dismissive. The rules apply to everyone, regardless of your situation. If you can't follow the rules, maybe you shouldn't be living in this neighborhood. You're making us all look bad. Her words stung, but I was too tired to argue. I felt a wave of helplessness wash over me. It was as if she were invalidating everything we had gone through in the past few days. All the pain, all the exhaustion, all the sleepless nights. I was just trying to survive, to keep my family safe and secure. And here was Karen, telling me I wasn't doing enough. I wanted to tell her exactly what I thought of her rules and her cold, heartless approach, but I couldn't. Not right now. Not while Emma was in my arms, her tiny face scrunching up in response to Karen's raised voice. Karen, please lower your voice. You're scaring her, I said quietly, trying to calm Emma as she started to cry. But Karen didn't seem to care. Her gaze flicked down to Emma, and for a moment I thought I saw something that looked like disgust in her eyes. Don't try to make this about your baby, she sneered. This is about the rules. We all agreed to them when we moved here. If you can't follow them, then maybe you should consider moving somewhere else. The words hit me like a slap across the face. I had spent my whole life trying to build something for my family, a home where we could feel safe and loved, and Karen was telling me I didn't belong here. It was a simple trash can, for God's sake, a small, meaningless detail, yet she was using it to control us, to dictate our lives. The anger rose in my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm. I couldn't let her win. Not like this. I'll take care of it right now, I said, my teeth clenched so tightly that my jaw hurt. Just lower your voice, please. My wife is inside and she needs a rest. Karen didn't seem to care. She continued to glare at me, her eyes as cold and unfeeling as ever. And that mailbox, she added, as if she were looking for anything else to criticize. It's crooked. It's making the whole street look sloppy. Fix it by tomorrow morning, or you'll receive a fine. I looked at the mailbox, squinting in the fading light. It wasn't crooked. It was perfectly straight. It had been that way since we moved in 2 years ago, but it didn't matter to Karen. If she found something wrong, she would exploit it, twist it into an issue that needed to be fixed. Okay, Karen, whatever you say, I said, my voice tight with frustration. She gave me one last disgusted look, as if I were the one who was out of line, and turned on her heel. Her high heels clicked loudly on the pavement as she walked away, her clipboard still gripped tightly in her hand, a symbol of her relentless authority. I watched her go, feeling a mixture of anger and helplessness. This was supposed to be a time of joy and peace, but instead, I was dealing with a woman who had no compassion, no understanding of the challenges we were facing as a family. I brought the trash cans inside, still holding Emma close to my chest. She had calmed down, her little cries fading as I rocked her gently. I kissed her forehead, whispering to her that everything would be okay, but deep down, I knew it wouldn't be. This wasn't just about the trash cans. It was about the way Karen had violated the most basic of boundaries, the way she had turned our home, our sanctuary, into a battleground. I looked down at my daughter, my heart aching with the knowledge that I couldn't protect her from everything. Karen had crossed a line, and I knew she wasn't done. This was just the beginning. And for the first time in my life, I felt the darkness inside me stir. The side of me that had been buried, the side that would stop at nothing to protect my family. I didn't know yet what I was going to do, but I knew one thing for sure. Karen Miller had just made a very dangerous enemy. The days that followed Karen's visit felt like a never-ending storm. It wasn't just the trash cans or the mailbox anymore. It was everything, every small, innocent detail of our lives that Karen had twisted into a weapon. The weight of it all sat heavy on my chest like a 1,000-pound weight I couldn't shake off. Each time I looked at Emma, her tiny face filled with trust, her big eyes searching mine as if asking me to keep her safe, I felt like I was failing her. I had promised to protect her, to shield her from anything that could hurt her, and yet here I was, unable to stop the force of Karen's cruelty from creeping into our lives. I spent every waking moment worrying about Emma's well-being. I couldn't help it. She was so small, so fragile, and everything I did seemed to fall short. Every time I held her, I felt my heart breaking into a million pieces. I was her father. I was supposed to be strong, to be the one she could always count on. But when I looked into her innocent eyes, all I saw was a helpless little girl who didn't understand why she was being locked away in her room, or why the woman who was supposed to be part of our community was so hell-bent on tearing our family apart. Every time I saw her in Sarah's arms or heard her giggling softly, I wanted to cry, but I couldn't. I had to keep it together for them, for Sarah, who was still recovering, and for Emma, who deserved better. The truth was, I was terrified, terrified of what Karen might do next, terrified of failing as a father. The thought of someone hurting my daughter, my precious defenseless little girl, sent a shiver down my spine. And yet, there was nothing I could do. At least, that's how it felt. Every time I tried to push the anger down, it boiled to the surface. I spent hours pacing the living room, trying to think of a way to confront Karen, to make her understand how deeply wrong she was. But every time I thought about it, my mind raced with thoughts of Emma. I couldn't risk making things worse. I couldn't risk something happening to her, not while Karen was lurking in the background, ready to pounce at any moment. I thought about how helpless I had felt when she locked Emma in that room, how small I had been in the face of her power. I kept thinking, why is she doing this? What had we done to deserve this? Sarah, too, was struggling. I could see it in the way she moved slowly, her face tired, her eyes glazed over as if the world around her had become a blur. She wasn't the same. She wasn't the Sarah I had married, the vibrant, energetic woman who could light up any room with her smile. Now, she seemed hollow, drained by the pressure of everything that had happened. I wanted to talk to her about Karen, to share my anger with her, but every time I looked at her, I knew she didn't need more weight to carry. She had her own battles to fight. One evening, I sat with Emma on the porch, just rocking her gently in the old wooden rocking chair Sarah and I had bought together when we moved into the house. The sky was painted with streaks of purple and gold as the sun began to set, and the air was cool, the kind of evening that felt peaceful. But all I could think about was Karen, how she had come into our lives like a storm, tearing apart the peace we had built. Emma's little hands wrapped around my finger, her small, fragile body nestled against mine. I closed my eyes, feeling the warmth of her against me. She made the world feel right, even in the midst of everything falling apart. But the peace didn't last long. As I rocked her, I couldn't help but hear Karen's voice echo in my head. Rules are rules. That phrase haunted me. It's for her own good. It felt like a slap to my face, like Karen was telling me I wasn't fit to be a parent. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block out the image of Karen standing there, judgment in her eyes, telling me I wasn't enough. I wanted to scream at her, wanted to make her understand what she had done to our family. But the words never came. My body shook with frustration, and I felt a deep gnawing ache in my chest. How had I let this happen? How had I let this woman, this monster, bring so much pain into our lives? Every day felt like a constant struggle. I'd wake up, trying to start the day fresh, but the weight of Karen's presence loomed over me. I couldn't go out for a walk without looking over my shoulder, wondering if she was watching, waiting for another chance to tear us apart. I couldn't even take Emma to the park without wondering if Karen would find a way to make our simple moments into problems, finding something wrong, something to criticize. I didn't know how to fight her. I had no idea how to stop her. I kept thinking about what would happen if I did something, if I confronted her or stood up to her. What if she retaliated? What if she made things even worse for Sarah or Emma? The fear gnawed at me. I couldn't lose them, not after everything we'd been through. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about protecting my family from a woman who had no boundaries. I knew deep down that Karen wasn't going to stop until she destroyed everything we had built. And the worst part was, I didn't know how to stop her. That night, after another long day, I sat by Emma's crib, staring at the soft yellow walls of her room. The crib had been carefully set up, every little detail planned out. The stuffed animals, the blankets, the tiny clothes we had lovingly washed and folded for her. Every part of this room was a symbol of hope and love. But now it felt like a prison. It was supposed to be her safe place, but all I could think about was how much Karen had already taken from us. I ran my fingers over the edge of Emma's crib, thinking about how fragile she was, how vulnerable. And yet, Karen had come into our lives like a wrecking ball, taking aim at everything that was good and pure. I felt helpless. What was I supposed to do? How could I fix this? How could I protect Emma from this darkness that had already started to creep into our lives? The anger was still there, just under the surface, simmering, waiting for the moment when I would finally snap. But that moment wasn't here yet. I still had to be strong for Sarah, still had to be the calm, rational one. But the longer I let Karen control us, the longer I let her have power over our lives, the more I felt like I was losing everything. I wasn't sure how much more I could take. I wasn't sure how much more my family could take. As I sat there, the weight of the world pressing down on my shoulders, I made a silent promise to Emma. I will protect you. I will make sure you never feel afraid, never feel helpless, never feel like you're not enough. It was a promise I wasn't sure how I was going to keep, but it was the only thing that kept me going. Because right then, in that moment, my daughter was the only thing that mattered. And if Karen thought she could take that from me, she was about to learn just how far I would go to protect my family. The days stretched on, each one feeling like an eternity as Karen's presence continued to loom over our lives like a dark cloud. The emotional toll of the past week was taking its toll on me. Every day, I woke up determined to stay focused, to get through the motions and take care of my family. But each time I looked at Emma, her tiny, trusting face, I was reminded of what Karen had done to us. She had crossed a line, and I knew I couldn't let her get away with it. The anger I had been trying to suppress was growing inside me, twisting my insides with a relentless, gnawing fury. Something had to be done. I spent days thinking about how I could make her pay, how I could expose her for the monster she was, but every time I considered it, the weight of the situation seemed even heavier. The legal system wouldn't be able to help us, not without concrete evidence. The police had already dismissed our case, and Karen's version of events was the one they believed. She was calm, well-dressed, and had a well-rehearsed story. I, on the other hand, had nothing but the raw, painful truth and a growing sense of desperation. But I knew, deep down, that the truth was all I had, and that truth would be enough to bring her down. I began to pay closer attention to Karen, watching her every move. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about justice. I knew that if I didn't take matters into my own hands, nothing would ever change. So I started keeping track of her daily routine. It wasn't hard. Karen was predictable, rigid in her need for control. She jogged around the neighborhood every morning at exactly 6 a.m. She would stand at the end of the street for a moment, take a few deep breaths, and then march off with an air of superiority. I found myself watching from behind my blinds, silently observing her as she went through her routine, every step she took filled with the same sense of entitlement that had nearly destroyed my family. I noticed her little habits, the way she would peer into other people's yards, looking for any reason to report someone for breaking a rule. Her fixation on perfection was consuming, and it drove her to scrutinize everything from the positioning of the mailboxes to the color of flowers in people's gardens. Her obsessive need for control was starting to affect the entire neighborhood, and as much as the residents feared her, they were all too scared to speak up. It was as if they had all accepted the oppressive rules she imposed. They had no choice but to comply, to keep their heads down and avoid attracting her wrath. But not me. I had made a promise to Emma, and I wasn't about to let that promise slip away. I had to find a way to expose Karen for who she truly was, to show the neighborhood that she wasn't some benevolent figure trying to protect the community, but rather a tyrant whose actions bordered on cruelty. As I followed her around, I started to gather pieces of evidence, little things that could easily be dismissed, but things that, when put together, would reveal the truth about her. I began talking to my neighbors, picking up small stories from people who had suffered under Karen's rule. Mrs. Peterson, the sweet old lady who lived 3 doors down, told me about the time Karen had poisoned her dog because it barked too much. She hadn't been able to prove it, but she had found her dog lying dead in the yard, the telltale signs of poisoning all too clear. It had been one of the first moments when she realized Karen wasn't just a rule enforcer, she was capable of much darker actions. Mr. Williams, who lived across the street, shared how Karen had keyed his car because he had parked a little too far over the line. He had witnessed her from his window, but when he confronted her, she denied it and threatened to sue him for defamation. The more I listened, the more I realized how much damage she had done, how much she had gotten away with, simply because she had the power of the HOA behind her. But I wasn't afraid of her anymore. I wasn't going to let her control me, control my family, or control this neighborhood any longer. The more I learned about her, the more my anger boiled. It was as if I could feel the old version of myself, the version I had buried years ago, starting to stir. The part of me that was willing to do whatever it took to protect those I loved. The part of me that had once been known as Reaper Reed in the underground fighting world of Chicago. I didn't want to go back to that life. I had made a vow to Sarah when we started our family that I would leave behind the violence and the darkness. I had promised her I would be a better man, but in that moment, as I dug through the details of Karen's life, I realized that if I was going to protect Emma, if I was going to protect my family, I had to face the part of me that had always fought to survive. I had to channel that darkness to bring justice. The more I investigated Karen, the more I found fraudulent receipts, bank statements showing unexplained transfers, and even emails detailing her manipulation of HOA funds. She had been pocketing money for years, falsifying invoices for repairs that had never been done, inflating prices for legitimate work, and pocketing the difference. Over $50,000 had disappeared into her personal bank accounts, and I had proof. It wasn't just about what she had done to my family anymore. It was about everything she had done to everyone else. I was going to make sure she paid for every last one of her crimes. I began to put a plan together. I knew that if I was going to bring her down, I had to do it carefully. I couldn't rush this. I had to make sure I had enough evidence to make the authorities believe me. That meant gathering as much as I could. I hacked into her email accounts and her financial records, using techniques I had picked up from my darker days. I had to be smart about it. I couldn't let her see me coming. But as I began to prepare for the confrontation, I couldn't shake the fear. What if it wasn't enough? What if Karen had covered her tracks too well? I had no choice but to keep going. The anger I had been holding back for so long was finally boiling over. I was ready to do whatever it took to make sure she paid for what she had done to my family and to the neighborhood she had poisoned with her presence. I spent my nights in front of my computer, digging through Karen's past, piecing together every little bit of evidence I could find. And the more I found, the more my hatred for her grew. She was a liar, a thief, a bully, and I wasn't going to stop until everyone knew the truth. Karen had no idea what was coming. She thought she was untouchable. She thought she could control us all. But she was about to learn that she had picked the wrong family to mess with. The moment of confrontation was coming. I could feel it in my bones. It was time to put everything I had into motion. I was no longer the man who just wanted to protect his family. I was the man who was going to bring Karen Miller down. The suspense kept building. Every day felt like a countdown. I knew what I had to do, and I was ready to do it. The sun had long since disappeared, leaving the neighborhood bathed in the soft glow of streetlights as I made my way toward the empty lot at the edge of town. The air was crisp, the kind of chilly evening air that made the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. I was there an hour early, prepared. I had hidden small cameras in the trees around the perimeter of the lot, all pointing toward the spot where I was about to meet Karen Miller. She had agreed to meet me there at 9 p.m. under the pretense that we were discussing a roofing job, but I wasn't there to talk about roofs. I wasn't there to negotiate or make deals. I was there to expose her for the monster she truly was. I could feel the tension building inside me, each second making my heartbeat louder in my ears. The old version of me, the Reaper who had fought in underground warehouses and basements for money, the one who had learned to survive by any means necessary, was stirring, waking up like a beast that had been chained for too long. But this wasn't a fight in a ring. This wasn't about violence. It was about justice. It was about giving my family what they deserved and taking back the power Karen had stolen from us. She thought she had won. She thought she could crush me with her rules and her cruelty. But she had no idea who she was dealing with. I checked the cameras one more time, ensuring they were in position. The area was quiet, save for the occasional rustle of leaves. I checked my watch, 8:45 p.m. Karen would be here soon. The anticipation made my chest tighten, but I didn't let it show. I couldn't afford to let her see any sign of weakness. I wasn't the man I had been when I moved to Maple Grove, the quiet, law-abiding mechanic who had left behind the dark world of underground fighting was gone. In his place stood a man willing to do whatever it took to protect his family. And Karen Miller was about to feel the full force of my wrath. At exactly 9 p.m., I saw her approaching. She walked with the same confident, almost arrogant stride she always had, clipboard in hand, looking like she owned the world. She was dressed in her usual uniform, expensive, polished, and carefully crafted to make her seem like the epitome of authority. She had no idea what was waiting for her. I stepped out from the shadows, and the moment she saw me, her face twisted into a look of disdain. She stopped in her tracks, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the empty lot, no doubt wondering where the so-called contractor was. I knew she had expected to meet someone else, someone who would fall for her tricks. But I was no fool. "Mr. Thompson?" she asked, her voice dripping with fake politeness. "Where's the contractor? This isn't the time for games." I didn't respond right away. I just stood there, watching her, letting the silence stretch between us. The cold air pressed down, making the tension even heavier. Finally, I spoke, my voice calm, controlled. "There's no Mr. Thompson, Karen." She took a step back, her face flushing with confusion. "What do you mean? Who the hell are you?" I let out a breath, stepping closer to her, letting my presence fill the space between us. "I'm Michael Reed. You've terrorized my family for long enough, and it's time for you to answer for everything you've done." Her eyes widened, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of fear in them. But she quickly masked it, shifting back into the cold, calculating Karen I had come to despise. "You're insane," she said with a laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I have no idea what you're talking about. I didn't waste any time." I pulled out my phone, opened the video I had spent hours combing through security footage to find, and played it. The screen lit up with footage of her, Karen Miller, sneaking into my yard in the dead of night, carrying a shovel, looking around carefully as she dug a hole near my rose bushes. She stopped once to look around, ensuring no one was watching, and then continued to dig. I could see her face clearly in the footage. There was no denying it. I held the phone up for her to see. Her face drained of color, her eyes locked on the screen, but she couldn't look away. She stammered. This isn't what it looks like. You don't know what you're talking about." I stepped closer, my voice low, but deadly serious. "Don't lie to me, Karen. We both know exactly what's happening here. You dug a grave for my daughter. You buried her alive in my own yard." Her lips trembled, and for a moment, I thought I might actually see her break. But she quickly regained her composure, narrowing her eyes. You have no proof. This is just a coincidence. I didn't flinch. Coincidence. I repeated, you've been using your position to terrorize everyone in this neighborhood, and now you're trying to justify burying a newborn in my yard? You pushed my wife down the steps. You kidnapped my daughter. And you're standing here pretending like you're innocent. I let my words hang in the air, watching the cracks form in Karen's facade. The confident woman who had once ruled the neighborhood with an iron fist was now visibly shaken, her hands trembling as she clutched her clipboard. But I wasn't done. I had all the evidence I needed to bring her down. I threw the folder of documents I had spent days collecting at her feet. Papers scattered everywhere, bank statements, forged receipts, financial records. This, I said, pointing to the mess of papers, is what every person in this neighborhood is going to see tomorrow morning. Your lies, your theft, your cruelty. All of it. She bent down frantically to gather the papers, but I stepped forward, grabbing her wrist in a grip that made her gasp. You don't get to play the victim anymore, Karen, I growled. You don't get to hide behind your rules and your lies. You've destroyed my family, and now it's time for you to pay the price. Her eyes were wide with fear now, and for the first time, she looked truly vulnerable. I could see the cracks forming in her perfect, well-maintained exterior. She was losing control. You think you've won? She sneered, her voice trembling. This neighborhood will fall apart without me. You need me. You all need me. I took a step closer, my voice low but filled with the weight of everything I had been through. No, Karen, we don't need you. You've been holding us all hostage with your rules, your lies, your power. This neighborhood will be better off without you. And I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what you've done. She stumbled backward, her face pale, her composure slipping completely. I could see the fear in her eyes, the realization that she was about to lose everything. The anger I had been holding back for so long surged through me, but I kept it in check. This wasn't about violence. This was about justice. And for the first time, I felt like I was in control. Karen didn't answer. She just stared at me, her eyes filled with loathing and fear. She knew she had lost. The game was over. By the time I walked out of the lot, I knew I had won. Karen had been exposed. She had no power left. The neighborhood would finally be free from her oppression, and my family, my little girl, could finally breathe again. The next morning, I did what I promised. I delivered copies of the video and the evidence to every house in Maple Grove. By noon, the neighborhood was in an uproar. People were shouting on Karen's front lawn, demanding answers. An emergency HOA meeting was called that evening, and the entire community packed the room. For the first time in years, the residents of Maple Grove were united against Karen Miller and the reign of terror she had imposed on us all. As Karen sat at the front table, shaking and defeated, she tried to justify her actions, but no one was listening anymore. Rules are rules, she muttered weakly, but the room erupted with angry voices. People shouted, demanding justice. Someone from the back of the room yelled, "You buried a baby alive." The police arrived an hour later. This time, they had enough evidence to arrest her. As they placed the handcuffs on her wrists, Karen looked directly at me with pure hatred burning in her eyes. "You think you won?" she hissed. "This neighborhood will fall apart without me. You'll see." I leaned in, close enough for only her to hear. "This neighborhood will be better without you," I whispered back. "It'll be free." And with that, Karen Miller's reign of terror came to an end. The days that followed Karen's arrest were a blur, a whirlwind of emotions and events that seemed to fall into place as if the universe had finally balanced itself. It was hard to believe that the nightmare we had lived through was finally over, but as the dust settled, I felt a strange mix of relief and guilt. Relief that my family was safe, that Karen was gone, and guilt that it had taken so much pain to get to this point. But I also knew that what we had done was necessary. There had been no other way to protect Emma, to protect Sarah, and to protect our future. The darkness I had unleashed to get justice for them would never fully go away, but it had served its purpose. Now it was time to rebuild. Sarah was still recovering. The doctors had told us that the physical damage she had suffered from Karen's violent push down the steps would heal, but the emotional scars were harder to erase. She had spent days in a coma, trapped in the unconscious world of her own body while I fought to keep it together. But now, as I sat beside her in our living room, I could see the faint glimmer of the woman I had married. The woman who had always been the light in our home, even when things were dark. She was slow to recover, emotionally and physically, but she was trying, and every little step she took toward healing made me more determined than ever to keep my promise to her, to never let anything or anyone hurt her or Emma again. It was a quiet morning when I finally felt like I could breathe again. The stress that had gripped me for so long began to lift, slowly, piece by piece. The tension that had been palpable in our home, the constant fear of what Karen might do next, was gone. For the first time in weeks, I woke up feeling like I could relax, even if just for a moment. Emma was still small, still fighting to grow stronger every day, but I knew she would be okay. She was our miracle, and nothing, not even Karen's cruelty, could take that away from us. The neighborhood, too, had begun to heal. I had expected there to be a lot of anger, confusion, and backlash. People were divided when it came to Karen. Some had been too afraid of her to speak out, while others had simply turned a blind eye to her reign of terror. But the truth had a way of surfacing when it was most needed, and as the evidence of her theft and abuse of power became public, the residents of Maple Grove started to take action. The HOA, once under her iron-fisted control, was dismantled. The community rallied together, determined to rebuild what had been broken. The sense of fear that Karen had instilled in everyone began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of unity and strength that I hadn't seen in years. It wasn't just the neighborhood that was changing. Sarah and I were learning to live in a new reality, one that had been altered by everything that had happened. I had promised to protect my family, and I had done what I needed to do to keep that promise, but the cost had been high. I had become someone I wasn't proud of, the kind of person who was willing to fight dirty, to step into the shadows of his past in order to win. The darkness I had kept buried for so long had crept out, and while it had helped me get justice, I knew that it was something I could never let fully take control of me again. I couldn't let it define who I was. I couldn't let it consume me. My family needed me to be better than that. But as I watched Sarah hold Emma in her arms, as I saw her smile and laugh, even through the trauma, I realized that the fight I had fought for them, for us, had been worth it. The Reaper, the man I had been before Sarah came into my life, would never fully disappear. But I knew now that he would never fully resurface either. He was a part of me, but he was no longer in control. I had learned something important through all of this. I could fight with everything I had, but I could also fight without losing myself. I could protect my family without becoming a version of myself that I was ashamed of. That I realized was the key to healing. Our healing didn't happen overnight. It couldn't. There were days when the fear still crept into my chest, when the anger flared up again, when I found myself reliving the worst moments of that night. The memories of Sarah lying on the lawn, unconscious and bleeding, and the image of my daughter, buried in the dirt, haunted me. But those moments no longer controlled me. Slowly, steadily, I began to rebuild. We began to rebuild. The community around us started to grow stronger too. The streets that once felt suffocating with fear now felt filled with the warmth of real community, people looking out for each other, offering support, and helping one another heal. Mrs. Peterson, who had lost her dog, came by one afternoon to tell me how happy she was that the truth had come out. She was finally free from the fear that had gripped her for so long. Mr. Williams and I had coffee together one afternoon, and he told me how much he admired what I had done, how I had stood up to Karen and fought back. Even the Johnsons, who had suffered from Karen's constant interference with their flower garden, stopped by to say thank you. The neighborhood, for the first time in years, was starting to feel like a real community again, one where people cared about each other, not just about the rules. For Sarah and I, it was a slow but steady return to normalcy. Sarah started going back to work part-time, And while she still had moments of weakness, she was determined to get back to the life she had always dreamed of. It wasn't easy, but she had always been strong, and now, more than ever, I could see that strength coming back. Emma grew stronger every day, and though she still faced challenges, she was thriving in ways we had never expected. Each milestone, each small victory felt like a win not just for her, but for our family. The love we shared, the bond we had built, was stronger than ever. I spent my days fixing cars, trying to focus on the work that had always kept me grounded. I still felt the pull of my past, the urge to fight, to confront the darkness that lurked just beneath the surface, but I kept it in check. I had learned the hard way that I didn't need to fight dirty to protect the people I loved. My family was my strength, and with them, I didn't need to become the person I used to be. I was better than that. And as I sat on the porch one evening, holding Emma in my arms while Sarah worked in the garden, I realized that we had made it through. We had survived the storm. The worst was behind us, and we were stronger because of it. The neighborhood was healing, Sarah was healing, Emma was healing, and I was healing too. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy, but it was real. It was a new beginning. I made a vow that night as I looked at my family that I would always protect them, that I would never let anyone like Karen Miller threaten the peace we had fought so hard to build. I would do whatever it took to keep them safe, but I would never lose myself in the process. And I would teach Emma when she was old enough that the most important thing in life wasn't about following the rules. It was about standing up for what was right, even when it seemed impossible. Karen Miller had tried to destroy our lives, but we had survived, and that, I knew, was the most important thing of all. As the sun dipped low on a warm, peaceful evening, the sounds of children playing and neighbors chatting filled the air. I sat on the porch with Emma in my arms, her small body nestled against my chest as she looked up at the sky, her eyes wide with wonder. Sarah was in the garden, tending to the roses she had so lovingly planted. The neighborhood, once suffocating under Karen's iron rule, was finally breathing again. The people here were no longer bound by fear, no longer living under the oppressive gaze of someone who saw rules, not people. Maple Grove, the place we had once feared would be forever tainted by Karen's cruelty, was healing. And so were we. It felt surreal. After everything, after all the pain and fear, after the darkness that had threatened to consume us, here we were together, stronger than we had been before. We had fought and we had won. But more than that, we had learned. We had learned that the greatest battles we face are not fought with fists, but with love, determination, and the strength to stand up for what is right. I watched Sarah as she carefully pruned the roses, her movements slow, but steady. She had come so far, and so had I. There was a time when I thought I had lost myself, when I had let the anger, the desire for revenge, take control. But the moment I held Emma in my arms for the first time, I knew I couldn't let that happen. I couldn't let the darkness consume me. I had to be better. For Sarah, for Emma, for our family. As the evening light bathed everything in a warm golden glow, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The nightmare was over. Karen's reign of terror was nothing but a distant memory now. And while I knew the scars would remain, the pain would fade. The strength we had built together, our family, our love, was stronger than anything she could have ever taken from us. I looked down at Emma, her tiny hands reaching up to touch my face, her giggles filling the air. I could feel the weight of my promise to her, the promise that I would always protect her, no matter what. She would grow up in a world where she was loved, where she was safe, and where she would never have to fear anyone like Karen. And for that, I would move mountains. I would do whatever it took to make sure my daughter had a world filled with joy, not fear. I leaned down, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead, and whispered, "I'll always protect you, Emma. Always." The words felt more real than ever, more powerful than they had in the past. The promise I had made was no longer just words. It was my life. It was my mission. And I knew, with all my heart, that I would keep it. Sarah joined us on the porch, sitting beside me and resting her head on my shoulder. I could feel the comfort of her presence, the strength we had built together. We had been through so much, more than I ever thought we would have to endure, but here we were together. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy, but it was ours. We had fought through the darkness, and now we were free. And that, I realized, was the greatest gift I could ever give my family. The gift of freedom. The gift of peace. As we sat there, watching Emma giggle and reach for the stars, I reflected on everything we had been through. I thought about the fear, the anger, the helplessness, and how it had all brought us here to this moment. I thought about the man I used to be, the one who fought for survival, the one who believed that fighting was the only way to win. But I had learned something different. I had learned that the most powerful thing in the world was love, and with love came the strength to protect, to stand up for what was right, and to fight for the ones you care about. We didn't need to fight with violence or anger anymore. We had something far stronger, our bond, our love, our resolve to always stand by each other. And that was something no one, not even Karen, could ever take away from us. As the stars began to twinkle in the sky, I made a silent promise to Emma, to Sarah, too, that I would always be there for them. No matter what came our way, no matter how hard life got, I would be their protector. I would be their shield against any storm that tried to tear us apart. And I would never, ever let anyone hurt them again. Not while I still had breath in my body. Are you thinking about what happened? Sarah asked softly, her voice filled with warmth and understanding. I nodded, my heart full of emotion. Yeah, I said quietly. But I'm also thinking about how lucky we are. We survived. We came out stronger. And we'll keep fighting. For each other. For Emma. For our future. Sarah smiled, squeezing my hand. I know. We've been through hell, but we've made it. And we'll keep making it together. Her words filled me with a sense of hope that I hadn't felt in a long time. We were free. We had faced the darkness, and now we had the light. It wasn't just the end of the battle. It was the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter where we got to decide how our story would unfold. We were no longer victims of Karen's cruelty. We were survivors, and we would move forward stronger than ever, with love and hope guiding us every step of the way. As I held Emma close, I realized that this was what mattered most: family, love, and the courage to fight for them. And that, in the end, was the true victory. If you found this story powerful and inspiring, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to HOA Karen Shorts for more gripping tales of justice and resilience. Your support means everything to us, and we want to keep bringing you the stories that keep you hooked till the very end. Comment below and let us know your thoughts. Where are you watching from? And what do you think of Karen's downfall? Share this video with friends and family who love intense drama and real-life justice. Together, let's make sure these stories get the attention they deserve. Subscribe now and never miss out on our next epic tale.